My name is Irene Miller, and on the night my son turned 45, he reminded me, with one cruel sentence, that in his house, I was no longer a mother. I was an inconvenience. The living room buzzed with the easy laughter of people who'd only ever known comfort. Kara's co-workers held glasses of cheap champagne. Eric's friends hovered around the muted football game on the TV, and the whole place smelled like chocolate cake and the rosemary chicken I'd spent the entire afternoon preparing. I stood near the doorway, close enough to watch but far enough not to disturb, holding a small gift bag that suddenly felt ridiculous in my hands. Inside that bag was a framed photo of Eric when he was 8. Missing teeth, frosting smeared across his cheek, the kind of smile a child gives only to someone they trust completely. I'd wrapped it carefully, thinking it might warm his heart for a moment, maybe remind him that before mortgages, deadlines, and the wife who wanted everything pristine, he once loved me without reservation. When he finished telling a loud story about his latest sales win, I stepped toward him, not to interrupt, not to make a scene, just to place my hand on his arm and whisper, "Happy birthday." A simple human gesture from a mother to her only child. But he jerked away as if my touch burned. "Don't touch me. Can't you see I'm busy? Go back to the kitchen. Mom." The room didn't fall silent, not all at once. It sagged into an uncomfortable hush, like people holding their breath and pretending they hadn't heard what everyone clearly had. Kara gave a stiff smile, someone coughed, and a few guests suddenly found the floor deeply interesting. I felt the heat rise in my face, a slow, humiliating burn that reached all the way to the back of my throat. Then, out of the corner of my eye, a small movement, soft, hesitant. Lily, my granddaughter, slipped her hand into mine and squeezed. Her voice barely rose above the hum of the air conditioner. "Grandma, you don't deserve that." I looked at her, at the only person in that house who still saw me, and something inside me shifted. A quiet click, a line drawn. "I know, sweetheart," I whispered, my eyes fixed on Eric's turned back. And that was the last time he'll ever speak to me like that. When the last guest finally stepped out into the cool Ohio night, the house settled into the kind of silence that made every dirty plate and overturned cup look louder than they should. Kara slipped off her heels with a sigh that suggested she'd hosted a gala instead of a modest birthday party. Eric loosened his tie, tossed it onto the couch, and didn't spare a glance at the kitchen, which looked like it had been hit by a small storm. "Irene, could you finish up a bit down here?" Kara called without looking at me. "Just load the dishwasher and wipe the counters. Eric has an early morning." As if I didn't know his schedule better than she did, as if I hadn't spent years adjusting my life to match whatever he needed. I nodded out of habit, but something in my chest tightened the moment the words left her mouth. They floated there, hanging in the air like a reminder of a role I never agreed to play. I stepped into the kitchen, the tile cold beneath my feet. The sink overflowed with plates streaked with frosting, beer bottles, cocktail glasses, and a serving spoon someone had dropped on the floor and stepped on. My knees ached the way they always did after a long day of cooking, but tonight the pain felt heavier, almost symbolic, like my body was finally protesting what my heart had grown tired of enduring. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring. My reflection wavered in the dark window above the sink. Tired eyes. Silver hair pulled into a bun that had loosened hours ago. The soft cardigan Lily bought me last Christmas. I looked like a woman fading into the edges of her own life. Behind me, Eric let out a loud laugh at something on his phone. Moments ago, he had flinched from my touch as if it were a burden. Now he was sprawled on the couch, texting friends, carefree and oblivious. Kara disappeared upstairs, humming to herself, My hands curled at my sides. I could clean the kitchen. I could spend the next 2 hours scrubbing away the mess, just as I had scrubbed away pieces of myself over the last 5 years. I could smooth things over, pretend nothing happened, tell myself he was stressed or tired or overwhelmed. But the truth, sharp, unkind, and undeniable, pressed into me. Nothing was going to change unless I changed it. I stepped back from the sink. I didn't touch a single dish. Instead, I walked out of the kitchen and made my way to the small room at the top of the stairs, the room they had asked me to temporarily move into 3 years ago. It used to be a storage space, barely big enough for a twin bed and a dresser, but Kara said she needed the downstairs guest room for her home office. I didn't argue. I rarely did. The door clicked softly behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under my weight, and looked around. A single lamp, a window the size of a postcard, a framed picture of Tom, my husband, on the nightstand. His smile gentle, almost apologetic, the way it had been the day before he died. I don't know what to do anymore, I whispered to the empty room. I don't know how to stay without disappearing. Outside, the house creaked as Eric walked upstairs. He passed by my door without stopping, without knocking, without acknowledging that he had humiliated me in front of an entire room earlier, for years. I told myself that he loved me, that he just didn't know how to show it. But love doesn't look like avoidance. Love doesn't sound like "don't touch me." Love doesn't push you into smaller and smaller spaces until you forget the sound of your own voice. My hand trembled as I pulled open the drawer of the nightstand. Inside lay a small stack of papers, Social Security documents, a few medical forms, a bank envelope with my latest pension statement, and a postcard Lily had made in art class the year she was 11. A field of lavender with stick figure versions of the two of us holding hands. She signed it, for Grandma, who always makes room for me. A breath shuddered out of me. I gathered the important papers and placed them inside a small folder. Then I took out a sheet of stationery I'd been saving, something with soft blue lines that reminded me of the library where I worked for 3 decades. My handwriting wavered as I wrote, but the words felt steady, certain. I wasn't leaving out of anger. I was leaving because staying had become a slow erosion of everything I had left. I folded the letter carefully, placed it into a plain envelope, and set it on my bedside table. Tomorrow morning, before anyone woke up, it would be waiting for them on the kitchen table. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of Eric and Kara closing doors, turning off lights, settling into the comfort of a home that no longer felt like mine. My pulse slowed, and for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a different kind of life, one where I wasn't constantly shrinking to make room for others. As sleep crept in, a strange calm washed over me. I wasn't sure where I would go. I wasn't sure how far the little money I had would take me. But I knew this. I could no longer stay. And knowing that was enough to get me out of bed before dawn, ready to begin again. The morning light hadn't yet touched the sky when I slipped out of the house. The air carried that faint chill Ohio gets in late fall, the kind that wakes you fully the moment it brushes your skin. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table, right beside the half-finished birthday cake, and stared at it for a moment. My handwriting looked small on the page, delicate, almost hesitant, but the decision behind it felt firmer than anything I had done in years. Outside, the taxi I'd called the night before waited at the curb. I climbed in with one small suitcase and the folder of documents pressed tightly against my chest. As the driver pulled away, I didn't look back. I'd done enough looking back for one lifetime. The motel I checked into was nothing remarkable. Peach-colored walls, a buzzing soda machine near the lobby, and carpeting that looked like it had survived several decades. But when I locked the door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, the quiet felt different. It wasn't the heavy silence of being ignored. It was space, air, the ability to breathe without waiting for footsteps outside my room. By noon, I'd already begun looking for a more permanent place. It took 2 days before I found a modest ground-floor apartment across town. The building was old but clean, and the landlord, a widower named Mr. Haskins, seemed relieved to find a tenant who didn't plan on throwing loud parties. The rent fit within my pension, barely, but for the first time in years, I turned a key in a door that opened into a space that belonged entirely to me. That first week was a strange blend of peace and fear. I bought a secondhand sofa, stocked the fridge with simple groceries, and spent evenings listening to public radio, the soft cadence of familiar voices filling the room. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart lurched. Eric didn't call. Neither did Kara. Only Lily. She showed up unannounced one afternoon, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair still damp from swim practice. When I opened the door, she fell into my arms with a trembling sigh that burrowed straight into my heart. "I thought they wouldn't let you come," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "I told Mom I was staying late to finish a project," she replied, stepping into the apartment and looking around with wide, curious eyes. "Grandma, it's small, but it feels... you..." We sat at the tiny kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate I'd made from the old mix I always kept on hand for her. Lily was quiet for a long time, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from the cup. "Dad's been weird since you left." She finally said, "He pretends he doesn't care, but he keeps pacing around the house at night. Mom's mad. She keeps saying you abandoned them." I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was crying. "Abandoned? Sweetheart, I was invisible long before I walked out that door." Lily bit her lip, then reached into her backpack, pulling out a thin stack of papers. I found something. I don't know exactly what it means, but I thought you should see it." She handed the papers to me. My pulse quickened the moment I saw the Maple Ridge Community Bank logo at the top. It was a printout of a loan statement, $25,000, issued under my name. Monthly deductions of $600. My pension had been shrinking, but I'd chalked it up to rising insurance costs. "I never signed this," I murmured, scanning the pages again just to be sure. "There's more," Lily whispered, lowering her voice as if someone could hear us through the walls. She pulled out her phone and opened a series of photos, screenshots, emails, messages, all from Kara's laptop. I stared at the screen, reading every line, each one colder than the last. If Dr. Kramer signs off on mild cognitive decline, we can move forward with the care facility paperwork. Once she's admitted, the house will sell quickly. We can pay off the credit cards and finally breathe. Eric's on board. He just doesn't want to talk about it. My hands trembled, not from age, from betrayal so deep it hollowed out the center of me. Lily reached across the table and held my wrist. "I'm sorry. Grandma, I didn't know who else to tell." I looked at her, my only ally in that house, and felt something shift again. Not the quiet resignation from before, but a spark, a steadiness. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "you did the right thing." And as I closed the folder over the loan papers and email screenshots, I knew this wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about fighting back. For the next 2 days, I barely slept. I kept rereading the loan documents, the screenshots Lily had taken, and the missing gaps of my memory that suddenly snapped into place, the unexplained deductions, the strange questions Kara had asked about my medical appointments. The afternoon she'd insisted I sign routine paperwork after my fall in the kitchen 3 years ago. I remembered feeling foggy from the pain medication and Eric hovering nearby, telling me to just sign so we can handle things for you. I'd trusted him, trusted both of them. The betrayal stung in a way that felt almost physical, like a bruise spreading beneath the ribs. But it was Lily's trembling voice that echoed louder than any anger I could muster. "You didn't deserve that." "Grandma." I wasn't sure yet what to do, but I knew I needed help, real help, not the kind that came from burying my fears. So when my neighbor, Martha, knocked on my door with a plate of lemon cookies and mentioned a local community center that offered free legal consultations for seniors, I felt something tighten and then release inside me, as if the universe had nudged me toward the next step. The center was small, tucked between a laundromat and a discount shoe store. Inside, a handful of people sat in folding chairs, murmuring quietly. A sign taped to the wall read, "Elder Rights and Financial Safety Clinic. Tuesdays only." When my name was called, I stepped into a narrow office where a man in his early 50s looked up from behind a stack of folders. His suit was worn at the elbows, but his eyes were sharp, observant in a way that made me feel seen rather than examined. "Irene Miller?" he asked, standing to shake my hand. "I'm Daniel Alvarez. What can I help you with today?" I sat down, unfolded my documents, and placed them on his desk. My voice wavered only once. "I think my son and daughter-in-law have been taking my money, and I think they're planning to have me declared incompetent." Alvarez didn't look shocked, which I appreciated. Instead, he adjusted his glasses and said, "Let's take this one step at a time." He examined the loan forms first, comparing the signature with the one on my ID. "This isn't your handwriting," he said calmly. "And if you didn't authorize a loan, that's fraud, especially with a senior's account." He tapped the corner of the page. "And these deductions, they're structured like an automatic repayment plan. Someone set this up intentionally." My throat tightened. "It was Eric," I whispered. "It had to be." He nodded sympathetically before pulling up his laptop. "We can request the bank's fraud department to review this. They'll have access to the authorization logs, fingerprints, video footage. But the emails—" He paused, scrolling through the screenshots Lily had taken. "These are more serious than the loan." My hands clasped together. Could they really force me into a care facility? I'm not confused. I'm not losing my mind. He leaned forward, his voice steady. "Mrs. Miller, you are perfectly competent. And with a physician willing to write a false diagnosis, yes, they could have tried. But now that you have evidence, we can intervene before anything happens." The room tilted slightly as relief washed over me. I hadn't realized how terrified I'd been until someone finally said the words, "You are safe," without actually saying them. Alvarez scheduled a fraud review appointment for the following week and asked me to bring any additional financial paperwork I still had. As I stood to leave, he rested a gentle hand on the edge of the desk. "You're not alone in this, Irene. And you're doing the right thing by coming forward." Those words stayed with me as I stepped outside into the crisp air. For the first time since leaving Eric's house, my steps felt deliberate, as though I were claiming each inch of sidewalk as my own. That evening, after double-checking that my door was locked, I laid out every document I owned: pension statements, bank envelopes, old medical bills, and sorted them into neat piles. I read through each line slowly, noting every discrepancy. A kind of quiet strength settled over me, like the steady glow of a lamp in a storm-dark room. They had treated me like I was fragile, like I was someone whose mind could be easily bent, whose life could be rearranged without her noticing. But they had forgotten something important. I had built a life long before they were old enough to challenge it, and I wasn't done fighting for it. The following week, when Mr. Alvarez and I walked into Maple Ridge Community Bank, my palms were cold despite the warm air blowing from the vents. The fraud investigator, a poised woman named Miss Turner, led us into a small office and pulled up the digital records tied to my accounts. Her eyes scanned the screen, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mrs. Miller," she said, turning the monitor slightly. "This loan was authorized from your home IP address. The signer used credentials linked directly to your son." Something inside me went very still. I had suspected it, but seeing it confirmed felt like stepping into icy water. "So the signature was forged," Alvarez said gently. "It appears so. We're pausing all deductions while we complete a full investigation," she replied. Walking out of the bank, I felt both lighter and heavier at once. Lighter because I finally had proof. Heavier because the truth was uglier than I had ever imagined. Alvarez touched my elbow in a steadying way. "This gives us strong leverage," he said. "Now we move to the next step." That step came sooner than I expected. A few days later, he asked me to meet him at his office. When I entered the conference room, Eric and Kara were already seated. Kara's smile was strained, as if she hoped charm could erase everything. Eric couldn't meet my eyes. Alvarez didn't waste time. "We have evidence of unauthorized withdrawals, identity misuse, a fraudulent loan, and written discussions about pursuing a false dementia diagnosis. These are serious offenses. Before we escalate legally, we're offering a chance to resolve this privately." Kara's face blanched. "You're misunderstanding the emails? We were overwhelmed. None of it actually happened. You planned it," I said quietly. "That's enough." Eric flinched at my voice. When he finally looked at me, he seemed smaller, afraid of what he saw reflected back. "Mom, I never meant for it to go that far," he whispered. "But it did," I answered, my hands folded calmly on the table. "And you let it." Alvarez outlined the agreement. The bank would likely void the loan. Eric and Kara would return what they withdrew. The power of attorney would be revoked immediately. If they refused, we would pursue formal charges. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Eric whispered, "What do you want us to do?" "I want accountability," I said, "and space." Weeks passed. The loan was erased. Small deposits, repayments began appearing in my account, yet even with justice moving in my favor, the ache remained, a hollow that no legal document could fill. Then the call came. Kara's voice shook. "Irene, we got a foreclosure notice. We can't keep up with payments, and if there's anything you can do, please." For a long moment, I said nothing. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. "Come to Mr. Alvarez's office tomorrow," I said. "Both of you." They arrived the next morning looking worn, humbled in a way I hadn't seen before. Eric's shoulders sagged. Kara clutched her handbag like a lifeline. I sat across from them, steady and clear-minded. "I have the means to buy the house," I said, "and I'm willing to clear the foreclosure." Hope flickered in Kara's eyes, but I held up a hand. "But I will only do it if you move out within 30 days. And acknowledge what you did. Fully." Eric's breath broke. Tears slipped down his face before he could turn away. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how I became this person." I believed the sorrow. I didn't excuse the actions. Some wounds didn't heal with a single apology. "This isn't about punishing you," I said softly. "It's about reclaiming my life." They agreed. The house became mine within weeks. The paperwork signed, the keys placed carefully into my hand by a realtor who had no idea how much history pulsed beneath the exchange. I didn't move into it. Instead, I renovated the porch, repainted the living room, added warm lights and soft chairs, and opened the doors to women who needed somewhere to land when life had taken more than it gave. Irene's porch, sometimes. When the sun sets, through the old maple trees, and the porch fills with quiet conversation, I think about Eric. We speak occasionally now, slowly, cautiously, as two people learning how to rebuild from opposite shores. I once thought freedom came from being needed. Now I know it comes from finally seeing your own worth, and I am, at long last, free.